Hi everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Today we're talking about the top 4 reasons your child might not be improving with their football. This is based on our experience from the countless number of years we've been coaching now, it seems, and all the children we've met along the way. And I think it's just basically the 4 main things, the 4 main areas that we've seen that might just be interesting for parents to listen to, might just give you a bit of advice and help as to what you can do to get your child out of a plateau maybe. So let's get into it. We're going to look at reasons and then also a little bit about what to do in those situations. The first one sounds really obvious, but you'd be surprised, is they're not training enough, not playing enough. And football's a funny one. I think for some reason, there just seems to be this belief that a child can train once a week and maybe play a match for their team, and that's going to turn them into a world beater. I don't really understand why, but there's just this misconception that, yeah, a couple of times a week is going to be fine, child's going to go on to bigger and better things. This is probably the main reason why children don't get better. They're just not playing enough, not training enough. Think back to when we were kids, we were out on the street playing all the time. Me personally, when I was a kid, I trained once a week with my Grassroots team and played on a Sunday. But the rest of the time I was outside playing football, playing on the street. So the amount of training time that I would get in, the playing time, was pretty big. That doesn't happen anymore. So just taking your child to one training session is going to be okay if it's the right training session. But if you really want to see the big improvements, it's then looking at more. How can we get more? So it's also thinking about, is your child at a team? Are they training once a week, even maybe twice a week? But then on a Sunday, Saturday, Sunday, they're sub all the time, because that's obviously eating into that playing time, eating into that development time. If they're always sub, then that's going to be an issue in terms of development. They're not going to really improve as much as the kids that are playing that match all the time. So those are certainly things to think about. We've got a good example of this. We had 2 boys started with us a while ago, 2 friends, late to football. I think probably 9 years old, 10 years old. Started at the same time, came to the same session, good in terms of attendance and consistency, came most weeks, and good improvement. You know, that was probably their only football really that they were doing, an hour a week, but some good improvements. And then they both wanted to trial for a team, and one of them got into this team and the other one didn't. And one of the parents spoke to us about it and was probably a little bit miffed and a little bit, I guess, didn't really understand why their child hadn't got in when this other child had, because they'd both been coming to the same session, both seemed to make some decent improvement. And when we got to the bottom of it, the player that had got into that team had been to 10 days of camps, should I say. So they'd been to our football camps where it's about 6 hours of football a day. They'd been to 10 days over the school holidays before this trial. And it was just then, it was like a light bulb moment. It's like, yeah, that kid has played around 60 hours more football than the player that didn't get in. And combine that with good quality coaching and good quality training, 60 hours makes a massive difference. Even just 60 hours playing football on the street is going to make much more difference than not doing that. So the boy that got into the team had just trained more. And it's sometimes as simple as that. It really is. You've just got to increase the frequency of the training sessions, ideally in a good environment and ideally with good quality coaching, which we'll come on to in a second. So what to do in those situations is invest in more coaching, invest in more training for them. Maybe if you can, you could join 2 teams. So maybe a Saturday and a Sunday team. So they're getting 2 training sessions, 2 matches. That would be a possible possibility. Again, you need to think about the coaching, the quality and so forth. Or just get them out with their mates. If you get your child out to the park and play football with them, that's one thing. But if you can round up 4 to 6 friends and take them to the park and let them just play, then that can be a lot more powerful. Playing mini matches and so forth, that can be way more powerful. Not always easily done, obviously, but That's just an example of something that you could do just to increase that frequency of playing time as much as anything else. Second reason why we see children not improving is they are in the wrong environment. So maybe they are training 2, 3, 4 times a week, but the environment's just wrong. This can be twofold. It can be that maybe the environment's too harsh and there's too much pressure. Some kids don't deal well in those environments. That could be that they're in a grassroots team but don't like the team environment. It might be that they're at a higher level in an academy but don't like the environment. Flip side is we've also seen kids that thrive on that pressure and want that challenge, want that push, where it is a bit more of a harsher environment, a little bit more of a dog-eat-dog environment. Some kids love that. So if you've got a kid in the wrong environment, that might be why their improvement has plateaued or started to decrease a little bit. They're just simply in the wrong environment. It's not the right sort of place for them for those reasons. Another one could be it's the wrong ability group. So maybe your child is too good for the particular group that they're in, or maybe they're just way behind that group and they're not getting on the ball as much. They feel out of place. All that stuff. But definitely the ability groups is one thing that we are certainly aware of at FootTech and how we can manage that, because it does make a big difference. Some kids, if they're training a lot and then one of their sessions is maybe with a group of kids that aren't as good as them, that's not always a bad thing, because it might mean they've got a bit more time on the ball, they can try a few different bits. But if they're training a lot with children that aren't as good as them and that's their only training that they're doing, then yeah, maybe it's time to look at something else. And equally, if you've got a child that's not at the right ability level for their group and they're training 2 or 3 times a week, they're getting the frequency in, but they're just not getting on the ball, they're not enjoying it because they're nowhere near as good, then that's what we need to look at there and how we vary that. What to do in those situations is try other places, try other teams. Even if it's a case of your child wants to go to this place or this team because all their friends from school are there or something like that, you might just have to look at the bigger picture with this. And they might not like it initially, but once they start seeing their improvements because you put them in a better environment, all will be forgotten. The big thing for them is that developing is fun and fun is developing. So if they're not developing, they're not going to have fun, even if they are with their mates, and particularly if they're with their mates who are getting better because they're better players. If that's happening, then they're soon just going to fall out of love with it. So try other places, try other teams. You might have to kiss a few frogs. You might have to go to a few places where, it's not great, but you won't know until you go. You can obviously ask friends, ask other parents, what are they doing, and get some ideas. And the other thing here is understand that a team environment might not be the right thing for your player yet, or indeed at all. But we have had countless conversations with parents that have joined teams and their child's just not ready, likes football, might be good at football, but they're just not ready for that environment for whatever reason. It happens. The big thing for you to think about is don't worry. Don't let that be a reflection of you or your child or whatever. It's just get them somewhere else where they can learn football, and then you can look at the team thing later down the line. Again, we've had countless examples of this where they've not been ready for a team, and then they've maybe come to us for a few months and built up some confidence and whatever, and then they're ready for a team and they can combine the two or whatever. But understand that just because they're not ready for a team yet doesn't mean that they're never going to be ready for a team. But equally, you might have a child your child might just want to play football, not worry about playing for a team and all that. Might just want to just play football a couple of times a week in the right environment that they enjoy, and that's that. They just like playing football. So yeah, that's definitely another thing to think about there. Number three of the top 4 reasons your child isn't improving is wrong coaching. So maybe they're training a lot, they're getting the frequency in. Maybe the environment's pretty good. It's a non-pressure environment, or it's an environment of pressure, whatever your child prefers, team environment, non-team environment, what have you. But the coaching isn't good. And the coaching might not be good for a variety of reasons, but we find that it's probably that there's not enough of the stuff that actually develops them for the game of football. You, as I say, you might be getting all the frequency in, the number of sessions and so forth, but if that coaching style isn't right for your child, then you might start to see that development dropping, the improvements dropping or plateauing, like I've said before. That doesn't mean sometimes the coaching might not be bad. That's maybe the wrong way of putting it, the wrong word to use. It might just be that it's not good for your child. But generally, in terms of what we mean by that is, if you're going somewhere where there's long lines of kids waiting for a turn, so there's minimal touch of the ball. If they're doing a lot of cone drills, as we've said, if you followed us for a while, cones can't tackle. So it's all right thinking your child's getting good at football because they're dribbling around cones, but when we put them into that match situation, are they going to have all the time in the world to do the dribbling stuff? No, they're not. Unrealistic drills that just aren't transferable to the game. So if the child's been given a lot of that stuff, very much unopposed, more so than the games-based stuff, more so than the opposed stuff, then they aren't going to get better for the game of football. That progress will be slower, and that might be why they're not improving. When they're put into these game situations, they just fall into bits because they're not used to it. They're not used to the actual game of football. And this is something, again, we see so much. It's kids that can do wonderful things with the football, but they're not actually getting better at football. So definitely something to think about. And you might have people listening to this now might have a child that can do a lot of stuff with a ball, and you're scratching your head as to why aren't they doing that on a Sunday? Why aren't they doing that on a Saturday for their team? Why isn't it transferring? And hopefully that answers the question. It's all right doing some of these things. Kids love it, doing all the skills and whatever. But if it's not transferring to the game, it's pointless. So hopefully that makes sense. If it's not the right type of coaching and the right type of training, that might be why they're not improving when they're playing the games or when they're put into the matches at the end of training. You've got, in Grassroots in particular, you've got coaches who just aren't coaches. And we speak to so many that they've got this pressure on them almost, and an unrealistic expectation from parents that they're going to drop their kid to them for an hour a week and they're going to turn them into Messi. And we've got guys that talk to us that are just like, they've thrown themselves into it because maybe their child wanted to play football, and that's it. It's not, they never had any aspiration to be a coach or manage a grassroots team, but they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart because otherwise their child wouldn't be able to play. But expecting them to be Pep or Klopp is very, very unrealistic. They've got full-time jobs, they've got families and so forth to sort out, plus all the admin that goes with being a grassroots football coach. It's tough. It's very, very tough. So expecting them to be wonderful football coaches isn't always the case. Don't get me wrong. There's some teams that you are, got guys that are fully committed to it, or girls that are fully committed to it, and really, really on with their coaching or whatever. Brilliant. But in a lot of grassroots teams, that just isn't the case. So these people have given up their time. They're not proper coaches. You'll do a level 1 online, which takes, I think, a couple of hours a week for 3 weeks. So expecting your child, putting pressure on a grassroots coach to then turn your child into this wonderful football player, it's unrealistic. It can happen, obviously it can happen, but the other things that we've mentioned today around the frequency and the environment and stuff like that, everything needs to come together, and the coaching side of it is massive. So don't expect them to be the answer, because that's unreal. It's not fair to them either, particularly when a lot of them only have 1 hour a week and a match. So hopefully that makes sense. The other thing with the coaching is too much of things like one-to-one coaching. Now, we have this conversation a lot, and we offer one-to-one football coaching, but the amount of parents we turn away for our one-to-one coaching is unbelievable. And it's because they feel that one-to-one is the answer. So we'll have parents of young children that come to us that have barely kicked a ball that think that one-to-one coaching will give them the best start. And you're forgiven for thinking that, because I think people liken it to stuff like having a PT. But the game of football is very, very different. And what we found from trial and error is that if you get a child doing 2 or 3 one-to-ones a week and not much group football, the same thing applies as above. It's not the right coaching, because once we put them back into a group session, it falls apart because they've not had any defenders, they've not had anyone giving them any opposition, they've not had to make many decisions. There's not enough chaos going on in one-to-ones where it transfers to the game. One-to-ones have their place, there's no doubt about it. One-to-ones do have a place, but it's working with players that are maybe getting that frequency of group football coaching, good coaching, good training, that want those extra little bits, the extra 1% and 2% and so forth. Maybe to work on a little bit of technique stuff with some feedback. That's all fine. But if you've got a player that's only playing and training once a week in a group setting, and then you're thinking that if you get a couple of one-to-ones in a week or one one-to-one in a week, that's going to make the difference. The progress is going to be so much slower. You'd be better off getting the right group session for them. Then you can look at one-to-ones further down the line. Again, I hope that makes sense. So what to do in these situations is, again, invest in higher quality football coaching for your child. You can speak to parents. Success leaves clues. If you've got a child that you're watching that's playing with your player, and they're really good and they're progressing and improving all the time, ask the parent what they're doing. Success leaves clues. It might be that they've got some extra training somewhere, or they're doing something at home that's making the difference. Maybe they're out in the street playing with their mates all the time, whatever it might be. But just speak to them. What are they doing, and how can you then help your child with that? What can you do for your child based on that feedback? But it's going to come down to the other stuff that we've mentioned today, finding more group football coaching in the right environment with the right coaching, fundamentally. But definitely speak to other parents. The last thing, probably the biggest, is number 4 of the reasons your child isn't improving. They simply don't want to do it. They simply don't like it. And this can be hard to take. There's no doubt about it. Maybe they're going because they think it makes you happy, which is heartbreaking for some parents to think about, and I get it. But I think you need to look at their body language, look at their engagement, and just judge over a number of weeks. Do they like this? Then, before before we hit the panic button that our children don't want to play football anymore, it's looking at the other 3 things. Are they getting enough training? So therefore, if they're not getting enough training, they're probably not improving as much, so therefore not enjoying it as much. Is that impacting their engagement? Are they in the wrong environment? Again, does that impact their engagement? And are they getting the wrong coaching, which is impacting their improvement? So if those 3 other things are there and the child's still not improving, then it's simply, or could be, because they simply don't want to do it. But even so, even with all those other things and taking them away and whatever, it's looking at your child, it's looking at their body language. Do they really want to play football? And that might be a tough conversation to have, but you need to have an honest one. And if they don't enjoy it, if they've given it a shot and it's not for them, then pull them out. What to do in those situations: pull them out, find something else to do. It doesn't mean they're never going to play football again. It might just mean that they need a bit of a break and they need to go somewhere else or do something else for a little while and then come back to it, perhaps, or not. Maybe they'll find another passion, and that is absolutely fine. And that's coming from somebody that is obsessed with football, who wants as many children as possible playing football, but we can't. It's unrealistic to think that every kid is the same and every kid should love football. It just doesn't happen. So have a think about that. Another sport, another activity, but think about the other 3 reasons why kids might not be improving beforehand. And is that right? Is that why your kid's not engaged, because they're not improving and therefore they don't like it? And the other thing there I would say is speak to the coach. If you've got a good coach, and good in this scenario means a good human, I guess, is to maybe speak to them about what they can do to engage your player a little bit more, your child a little bit more, because it might just be that they might just need a boost. They might just need to hear some good feedback from somebody that isn't you, and that might give them that little extra spark to continue playing. If you know that getting them involved in football and getting them involved in a sport is the right thing, then you need to just do what you can to keep them involved. And it might just be that. Speak to the coach. Look, I don't know if he's really enjoying it. I don't think she's really into football, but
I want to give it another shot for a few weeks. Can you help? And then if your child still doesn't want to do it after that, then fine. You know, we look at those other options there. So they're the four main reasons that we found over the years. Nothing revolutionary, and that's the point really, is that there's no magic thing, there's no silver bullet. It's these four things that fundamentally are the main reasons your child might not be improving. You know, stuff like injury and stuff. Of course, we can talk about things like that, but that's, you know, this is sort of the more general stuff. And if you do need any advice, as we always say in these areas, just speak to us. You can maybe ask us about the coaching your child's getting, maybe the frequency of training, whatever. What do they need to do maybe to improve? Just speak to us. That's what we're here for. So hopefully that has helped. Thank you very much as always for listening, and we'll be back again with another episode soon.